Morning, everybody. Today is Monday, April 28th, and today is a special day because it's Canada's election day. And I thought I would take the time to do a short video to share with you some of my thoughts and some ideas on what's going on and kind of where my head's at on this thing. I thought you might find that to be interesting. And of course, I certainly would love to hear your thoughts. But let me start off by saying that I'm open to meaningful dialogue. I'm open to people who want to share meaningful conversation or comments or ask questions or answer the stuff that I say. But at the same time, if it's going to be very toxic or dismissive or demeaning, then I will either ignore or block those comments because I think that's kind of where we're seeing a lot of these challenges today. So, first off, I haven't voted yet, but I'm going to vote today. Normally I would early vote, but what's interesting is that in the early votes, there was a 25% of people already voted in Canada, and we're probably going to beat our best estimate for elections in terms of voter turnout. Maybe as even high as 70%, which is quite substantial. But I'm going to actually talk about observations, hard truths or truth bombs, and I'm going to cover things hopefully in a way that you'll find enjoying. So let's start with the first, and just going to go through a series of questions. Okay, so let's start with the first question. The first question that comes up a lot is this the most important election in our lifetime? Oops. Well, I mean, that's a great question. Is it? Well, I mean, it's very debatable, that's for sure. I mean, a lot of people are talking about it as the most consequential election in our lifetime, and I understand that. That feeling, and the reason I think that people think that way is, well, I mean, we say this all the time. It's the most important election in our lifetime. What does that even mean? I think that in our case, there are reasons why it's important now, because particularly the sovereignty threat, the threats of annexation and making Canada a 51st state per se, that's certainly something that is was not thought of or it was unseen or unplanned for, and it certainly unified a lot of Canadians around that. So that to me has been a very powerful thing. And I think the other thing that's happening is because there's such a huge rise of populism, of right-wing stuff, alt-right media, or disinformation, misinformation, targeted ads, bots, security, influence, China, Russia, other places, India. So I think that people are really nervous and worried, and so I totally understand why. It's a very consequential piece. So I can understand that. In terms of my lifetime, I mean, yeah, I guess it is more consequential because, to be honest, I don't know where we're going to go from here, because I think that the world's more divisive, and I think that we're definitely in a state where it's going to cause a lot of problems for us. So yes, I definitely see that. I see that issue, and so yes, I can see why it could be the most consequential election. I mean, it is for my lifetime for sure, but to be honest, I mean, I also think no matter how it goes, I think we're gonna get through it. We're gonna get through it together. So that's the first thing, and let me start with the first kind of truth bomb I want to get to, and a lot of you might disagree with me on this. You see all the time on posts that it's going to destroy Canada. Voting for Poilievre the Conservative will destroy Canada. Voting for Carney Liberals will destroy Canada. Voting for anyone else will destroy Canada. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's going to destroy Canada. And look, I'll be very full disclosure. I was very much against, like 6 months ago, I was very much against, getting a Conservative majority with Poilievre, but and I don't think it's happening now, which is fine. But that's kind of where I was at. I was like, I don't want this. I don't want anything to happen. And so for me, I was very, very mindful of that. But do I think it'll destroy Canada if one or the other wins? No, I don't think so. We'll get through it. We have a pretty good parliament. I mean, the first thing I'll say is that, and I know people talk about this in the U.S., but like we actually have this ability where whatever the election outcome is, we will respect the results. And I mean, people won't be happy about it, but we'll still respect it, whether it's a majority Liberal government, majority Conservative government, or minority government for either. We'll respect that stuff because that's just how we roll. We may complain about it, we may say stuff, but I think for the most part. So in terms of destroying Canada, no, I don't think that I don't think that it's going to be that big a deal, to be honest. I think that we're going to be okay. So that's kind of why I think it's. That's why I think that I think we're going to be okay. So that's the first thing. It's not. It's not going to. No matter what the rhetoric is about how people want to fear monger about destruction of Canada. I mean, to me, the greatest threat to destruction of Canada is really what the U.S. government under Trump is going to do. That to me is the biggest one. Which brings me to the second, another truth bomb I want to tell you. This idea that, look, I think everyone should vote. I want you all to vote. The fact that we're going to have lots of votes this election, we already had a record broken for, early election voting. I couldn't vote because we went away for the weekend on Easter weekend, but I'm going to vote today. But definitely vote. Everyone should vote. I encourage everyone to vote. Young people, old people, all across the board. It doesn't matter who you're supporting. Just get out there and vote and have your voice heard. But there's this idea that if you don't vote, you have no say. You can't complain about the results. I disagree. I think that if you pay taxes, if you run a business, if you are part of society and you are part of the social societal contract or construct, then you're allowed to say whatever you want. I don't think we should really stifle voices just because they didn't vote. Some people choose not to vote. They're disillusioned. That doesn't mean they don't have a voice. I think everyone has a voice. So for me, that's another thing that I kind of want to put out there. If you don't vote, it's fine. I want you to vote. You should vote. It's a great idea to vote. But if you don't vote, I'm not going to say you don't have a say. I'm going to say, I want to know what you have to say. What's your opinion? Why didn't you vote? What are you feeling? What are you upset about? Okay. And then, of course, it goes back to the accepting the results, right? Majority or minority, we will accept the results. I don't want a majority government, but if it happens to be one, I'll accept it. I'll complain about it. I will complain about it because I believe in voter reform and proportional representation, but I will accept it and do what I can based on that. So, and if you have any other questions, I'd love to hear what they are. Put them in the comments and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear kind of what thoughts you have on some of the stuff I'm talking about right now. So that's the first piece. Now I kind of want to get into some observations, and let's start with a few here. And I wrote some down here that I want to talk about. Number one, let's talk about Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. So more full disclosure. In 2015, I voted for Bob Rae in my riding and voted Liberal strategically because I wanted to stop Harper. In the next election, I voted for Jagmeet Singh because I liked his positive energy and the way he was talking. And actually, in 2015, I did like Trudeau's positive, sunny ways. I think Sunny, even Jack Layton back in the day, the positive energy, the vision, I like that kind of thing. I don't like negativity or toxicity, which we'll get to in a second. So I voted for Jagmeet Singh and NDP in the second election, but then the third one, I was disillusioned with both the Trudeau Liberals and the Jagmeet Singh NDP, and so I decided to vote for Green. Plus, the new Green leader at the time was in our riding, so I decided to do that kind of to support the Green. Maybe she gets in, and also to as a protest vote. Now, voting, just we'll get to that in a second. But Jagmeet Singh NDP, I met Jagmeet Singh. I love the guy. I love his passion. I love his energy. I love that time when he stood up to that bully. That was great. But I do think that him staying on too long has dealt a huge blow to the NDP, including, my buddy Norm, who almost won an election in Spadina, Fort York, Harbourfront. But then the Liberal candidate was fraud, and then Liberals got rid of him. But he started trying to get elected as a Liberal, even though he wasn't anymore. And he won by just it was 15,000, 16,000 votes. And my buddy Norm lost. I think he's a great guy. I hope he wins. But now this year, because of the huge unprecedented thing where 80% of voters polling are going either Liberal or Conservative, that's mind-blowing. That's never happened before. Usually what happens is a party will have 37, 38, 39% vote, and they'll win a majority government. Now you have two parties at 43% and 37%. That's unbelievable. That's crazy. So, seeing he should have resigned. And now the NDP is tanking, or at least when he talks to people, he should have been the biggest threat, the biggest trends in this election are, number one, the threat of Trump, tariffs, annexation, sovereignty, all that kind of stuff. Number two is change, because the change vote, when you have electorate, you have 3 mandates, you get the same government for 10 years, and then when you go through a pandemic, people want change. That's a very common thing. But the Trump thing is completely taken over and so to me, if he really wanted to, do better, he probably could have said, here's how we're going to fight Trump. But he didn't do that. He was focused more on, grocery bills. And I understand the economy is also important too. I get it. But the two biggest things are the Trump threat and change. So to me, you have to talk about those things. So after this election, I think that he'll resign, or at least I hope he should, because I've been calling him to resign for over a year now. So we'll see what happens. Number two, let's talk about the Trump annexation of Canada, the 51st state thing, all that kind of garbage. That's the number one trending thing that people are voting for. I mean, when Mike Myers did the elbows up thing, it really, like, who knew elbows up would be such a something that gets people to got people so excited. I didn't even know what it meant. I saw, I was like, what is that on SNL? What is that? But now it's a huge thing. It's a huge hashtag. And of course, there is still the change thing, but like change for the sake of change versus something that's terrible or bad or incompetent, you have to be mindful of that. There's also other people who are voting for, the economy is obviously a driving factor. And then the sad part, though, is that other issues are being ignored. I mean, I see people talking about crime. Okay, fine. People are ignoring climate, which is like one of the most important issues of our day, but it often gets second or third behind other things. And of course, marginalized people, that's one of my biggest things. Indigenous people, Black people, brown people, Muslim, Jewish, LGBTQ, trans people, old people, sick people, young people, women, anyone who's marginalized or oppressed, groups, they're being ignored. Or you're choosing change, yet ignoring that other stuff, right? So the truth is, like, if you choose change and you choose polyamorous and conservative as your person or as your team, you are missing out on the fact that they are doing really bad things for climate or doing nothing for climate. Same with BIPOC and LGBTQ plus. But to me, climate and marginalized people are the biggest challenges. And so, I mean, I would say you gotta own that shit, guys. Just like vote for what you want. If you're voting for crime, great, but then own the stuff that you're actually, taking away. Or if you're voting for, liberals and Carney, and for whatever reasons, you have to own the stuff that are also bad. You own the good and the bad, because when you don't, it's disingenuous and it doesn't come across as authentic, right? So that's something you have to keep in mind. And a lot of people I see are ignoring. They're voting for that one issue or two issues that are important to them, but then they don't realize how bad the choice is for something else. I mean, look, if you really care about climate and you want change, then go for the Green Party or advocate for them to help do some grassroots work. If you really care about marginalized people, then vote for NDP in your riding or advocate for them to do a better job or whatever it might be. But you don't have to just automatically choose one or the other. It's funny because I've been doing a lot of posts about this stuff, and people are like, "Who do you support, Bobby?" Well, honestly, I don't trust anyone. I support proportional representation and marginalized people and the things that that people are struggling, because those to me are the biggest struggles. Okay, another observation. Paul here got everything he wanted, right? JT resigned. A little too late, in my opinion. I'd been calling for him to resign a year ago. They got rid of the tax, and I know people are complaining, yeah, they only bring it back. Yeah, they might. But the point is the toxicity of the right wing, made it poison that carbon tax, and that's fine. There'll be, but I think we do have to do something around sort of, there are provinces and territories and places around the world who do a good job of leveraging taxes to help with climate change. And then also, probably wanted an immediate election, which he also got, and it blew up in his face. And I have never seen such a huge turnaround. There were 25 points up. 6 months ago, I was like, 9 months ago, I was like, man, JT needs to resign. Otherwise, I want to avoid a polyamorous majority. And then, 6 months ago, I was like, man, if no one's resigning now, like, we're now at the threat of a polyamorous supermajority. And then 4 months ago, I was like, man, there's going to be a supermajority and maybe a majority for 2 mandates. That's 10 years. And the next thing you know, JT resigns, Carney comes in, the Trump thing happened, and then Trudeau had 4 weeks of really awesome stuff, good speeches, calling him out, standing up. And then so he went out on a pretty good note. And then Carney comes in saying similar things, and that's been completely changed things. And then call the election, and now we have, liberals ahead, and now might get a majority. That kind of blows my mind. So I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen two parties have so much support, and everyone else, the Bloc, NDP, Green, are all tanking. So that to me is also fascinating. The other thing I want to talk about is the negativity and toxicity of Poilievre on the right. Look, Poilievre is clearly, he's not he's not a very likable guy. He talks about, like, he just had all that rhetoric and divisive, and here's who to blame, and you're to blame, and here's why it sucks, and Canada sucks, and he's very, very Trump-like. And I know people think that's going to work, but is it going to work? I mean, it can, and it does, and it has. So I understand why people do it. But the part that kind of gets to me is this culture. There's this 20% of people who are very, very toxic on the alt-right, but they're also they're taking in the culture. And so, I never liked the Trudeau flags. I just thought, even back in the day when it was like, Chrétien and Harper and Martin and Mulroney, those guys, no one ever talked like that. You don't say F them. I understand people are angry, but when you start to become so angry, you start to be like saying things like that and you get all toxic. That's a bad situation. And this thing is rising, which is going to lead to another point about. But what I'll tell you is that it's definitely there. It's definitely toxic. People are angry. And I understand if people are really angry with Trudeau for many, many years. And so they, have the flags. I think it's still a bad idea, but they do it. But then now we have flags that say F. Carney, and he's only been around for a couple of months. Like, why is your anger against him? To me, it doesn't make sense. It's disingenuous, and it just seems hateful for the wrong reasons. But maybe because you had nothing else. Because as soon as JT was gone, all that hate against him, that bubbles burst, and so now what do we do? But to me, that's a bad thing. And the other thing I've noticed too is that a lot of people on the right, whenever I post something on Facebook or Twitter, where the people respond in harsh, negative ways are the people on the right. They get defensive, but they say really terrible things. And I find that really, really odd. Like, now that's true. Now, when I talk about Trudeau being, resign, he should resign a year ago, or even Jagmeet, some of my NDP friends, some of my eligible friends were not happy with me. But they would just say, I disagree with you. They're great, or here's what you need to do. And that's fine. But the toxicity of the right, it's there. And if you can't acknowledge that, that's a huge problem. Okay. And that toxicity is rising, it's growing. I think that's a big concern. And I'll share some personal stories with my friends. I've had friends, I had a friend, I had a friend, not only are they being toxic and negative, I had a friend on Facebook actually post a fake photo of Tom Hanks, Mark Carney, and Ghislaine Maxwell on a beach, which was obviously fake. I looked it up, and clearly there was third-party fact check said this is fake. I shared it. This is fake. You should remove it. And then crickets. He didn't say anything. He didn't want to acknowledge it because he was so angry about his main thing was crime, right, or economy, whatever it is. Like, that's really bad. And he is someone that at the time I respected, and we worked together as a colleague. Like, I can't believe you're doing this. And then I'm also seeing other people, like another person I admire and love, and is a sweet person who's really big on climate and really big on health and wellness, and probably someone I think that supports LGBTQ and BIPOC rights and things like that. Yet all of a sudden, because of the one issue around freedom of choice, they're supporting Poilievre. And whenever I point out the other issues around that, they ignore them. And it's okay. Like, again, you can support whoever you want, but you can't ignore what the impact is. Like, if you vote Liberal, then yeah, someone can complain to you about corruption, or they've been around power for too long, or that there's the pipeline. These are legitimate complaints, right? But this idea that you're going to vote for this person but they ignore this, I've seen so many. It's hard to understand, but I think what's happening is many of I'm going to call them my entrepreneurial, holistic, spiritual friends who are mostly left and progressive, because they had that issue around freedom of choice, which mostly was the result of the vaccines. But next thing you know, they're supporting the Freedom Convoy. And next thing you know, they're hanging out with people who are on the right talking about certain things, like from the PPC party. And now they're saying things that are anti-immigrant. They're saying things that are, anti-climate. And they're agreeing with things from like Rebel News and True North Media, which are clearly biased non-media entities, that's a problem. The other thing I see is some people who are more thoughtful, and they're like, I'm going to vote for this way or that way. They'll because of crime, they'll vote for Polyamorous, but then and then when you bring up the other things, like they start finding ways to ignore those things. So, but the part that I think that really gets me is I've seen multiple people post toxic stuff. So, for example, someone just posted who's clearly, I asked about, what's your biggest driver in this election? Is it the Trump thing? Is it the change thing? Is it the economy, whatever? And then they said pronouns. I'm like, pronouns? Seriously, that should be, or they made a joke about it, but like, how do you joke? What you joked about, it's offensive, right? Because even talking about that means that you don't care or respect the people who wish to be respected with that stuff, which means now, even though I saw they were formerly a progressive person, now they're supporting polyamorous because, they care about the freedom aspect, but now they're making fun of pronouns. How did that happen? How did you lose yourself in that toxic echo chamber down there? So that's happening. And the fact they're sharing fake news and fake information, that to me is another big thing. Another thing happened, like on Facebook or on Twitter, I don't go into other people's posts. Like I see people posting stuff all the time, and they're saying stuff about whatever. And some of it is absolute fake nonsense, and some of it's just, how they're feeling. But I'm not saying anything. I don't go to their posts, but when I post, they come to my posts and they, joke or they make fun or whatever. How can you say that? Go ahead. But I don't go to your posts and I don't like shit in your posts, right? Depends on what it is, but I typically don't do that unless they ask me or they tag me or something like that. So I think that personal story of the friends is kind of a big thing. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is I really, really hope there's not a majority government. And the reason is because I think it's going to be bad for Canada. And here's why. I love minority governments because even though it's slower, it forces people to kind of work together. There's accountability, transparency. I really dislike this idea that, a certain portion of the electorate will vote for a party, 40% of the vote, and then they get 100% control for 5 years. I just think that's absolutely stupid and mind-boggling. And no one has any sort of say. I mean, yeah, you can protest, but like, it's just too much. I'm all for proportional representation. But the other part that's getting to me is like, look, certainly I don't want to polyamorous majority government, which at this point I don't think it's going to happen. But now I don't want a liberal majority government. I know some people are like, yeah, but if they do it, then he can pass the mandate and fight Trump, and he has, I get that. But what's the cost? Here's the thing. We've had 10 years of liberal rule and 3 mandates and went through a pandemic. And most governments around the world that went through the pandemic, they all changed because there was a huge change wave. This whole Trump thing has affected things. But if we have a majority government, the people on the right who've been itching for change for 10 years, but even more so now, that toxicity, that anger, that hate, that vitriol is going to grow. It's going to make them more intransigent. It's going to make them more negative. It's going to make them more toxic. And the percentage, whether it's 10% or 10%, 20% of those people, it's going to grow. And I think it's going to turn into something what happened in the US, which is essentially when Obama was in 8 years, and then there's this growing negativity, and next thing you know, it just kind of blew up with the first Trump election. And so my worry is that with a majority government, that's what's going to happen. Now, unless Carney and the Liberals do lots of great things, I mean, if they address crime, they address the economy, and they address the Trump thing, and they come up with stuff that all the people on the right complain about. I mean, there's some things they're not going to fix. But that to me is another thing that's going to happen. So I think that to me, a majority government will be far more detrimental to the political rhetoric, the divisiveness, and the climate in this country. So for me, I don't really want a majority government. And again, I even disagree with really close people to me. This is a very controversial issue, but I don't want it. I definitely want a minority government. Obviously, I prefer, and if Poly gets a minority government, fine. At least there's accountability and checks in place, and I don't expect him to do really much of the job. Because the truth is, he doesn't have a plan. His plan had like freaking 30 pages of a plan with 17 pages of his photo on it. The Liberal plan had 60 pages with 1 page of Carney in the front. So, they had all this time to put together plans, just like Trump had to put together, concepts of a healthcare plan, but they don't do anything. So I don't think they're going to do anything. But I think that a minority government, let's say liberals, I mean, okay, great. Like, yeah, but if they do that, they're not going to be able to pass it through. No, the truth is they will, because look, if you really care about the mandate, care about what people are talking about, the mandate of the people tells us that if we have minority government, the people have spoken and they want all you guys to get your shit together and work together. Right? The mandate, if it's a minority government, we can argue the mandate of the people is it's a minority government. You have to work together. Right? And no one's going to want to force another election. If Poilievre says, okay, I'm going to force another election, I'm calling a vote, whatever's left of the Bloc, NDP, and the Greens, they will not vote for another election. They're trying to rebuild, right? So it'll be like what Harper had. Harper had a minority government for multiple years because people don't want to call an election. So, and I think that there's transparency more, there's more accountability, and I think that we need to have a conversation about how do we heal the divide in our nation? How do we start having better conversations? What I find is that people are posting stuff or they're DMing folks. But to me, if you want to have a good conversation, you want to have a conversation, not like this, but like, at least live, but also why don't we have a conversation over coffee, over breakfast? That guy who posted that fake photo, I invited him to a call. Why don't we just go on a Zoom call? Hash it out. Let me hear what you have to say, as long as you hear what I have to say. As long as you're listening to understand me versus listening to refute me, I think we can have a conversation, but it's going to happen in person. And I'm happy to facilitate that. I was actually willing to do like a live stream where let me take two, Poilievre supporters, two Carney supporters, and two, maybe an NDP and a Green, and let's have a conversation, and I can facilitate. Because there's certain questions you have to ask yourself. Like, one question to ask yourself is, can I find something negative to say about the person I follow? What are my top 3 complaints? Can I find 3 things I like about the other members? What do you like about Conservative Party? What do you like about the Liberal Party? What do you like about Green or NDP? Right? Can I see something where I made a mistake in my bias and I've changed? Or, have I made a mistake in terms of what I've said and how I've said it? What I've said and how I've said it. Can I understand how people are feeling? That's what empathy is. Empathy is, can I understand how people are feeling? Empathy is, can I understand why they're feeling that way? And number 3, and this is the most important one, can I support how they're feeling? Right? So let's say you're voting for Poilievre, and next thing you know, you're voting for Poilievre, and there's people that are really upset about, let's say women are upset, or Black and brown people are upset, or LGBTQ are upset. Can you understand what they're feeling and how can you support them? Because that is what every good government does. They support everybody. They're voted in for all the people. So for me, I think the minority government will force the issue to have a little more healing. There's a greater chance for voting and voter reform. And I think that you can still be united against fighting the annexation stuff. And I think the fact that there's a little bit of, sitting on the fence, walking on eggshells and that type of thing, it'll actually force parties and people to do things more thoughtfully and meaningfully, with care, with accountability, than actually just drilling through all this stuff. So anyways, I know I've talked for a long time here. How long I've been talking for? My goodness. I did this because, and people say this is the most important election in our lifetime. Well, the fact that I'm doing this video tells me that it probably is an important election. So so there's lots there that I've shared with you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can put them in the comments. If you have any questions for me in terms of how to do it, if you want to have a conversation, I'm happy to do this again, because I do love talking about politics. I love talking about federal politics, U.S. politics. I even like talking now about provincial and municipal politics here in Toronto and Ontario. So, but look, if you're going to engage in conversations, right, try to be more open, try to be more understanding, try to listen to understand, and make sure you go vote. And as this election, happens, we'll see the results. What's my prediction? I don't know, because look, we don't know how polls are. Like the polls in the U.S., said one thing, and then but on the high end of the plus minus 3 points, it went +3 in a certain direction. It could happen this way too. We don't know. I just feel bad for my buddy Norm in the NDP riding. Hope he gets it, but I'm not sure. I feel bad for Elizabeth May, who I think is a great leader. I just think she made a poor choice with having 2 co-leaders. But I worry about the survival of the Green Party. what's going to happen next? I don't know. If Pollard loses a seat, he'll definitely resign from the leadership. But if he doesn't, if the Liberals are majority, then the party or if he doesn't, or if he wins, he loses to a minority government, maybe he'll stay. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping for a minority government, but I know there's a strong possibility for a majority government. And if that does happen, hold them accountable. Make sure they do what they need to do. And let's continue to do the work to heal the divide in our nation, to talk to each other, to talk to our neighbors, to talk to one another, and try to find a way to heal the rift that is clearly growing in this country. So that's my thoughts, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks everybody for listening. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Just comment on the different posts and see what you think, and we'll go from there. All right, guys. Take care. And you can go to my Instagram stories. I'm going to share some of all the memes that have gathering up all this year. It's the timing's terrible because yesterday was my mom and dad's anniversary, so I wanted to celebrate that, and I did on LinkedIn. But I'm going to post a whole bunch of all the memes I've collected. I'm just going to share them all. You take a look at them all and see what you think. But at the end of the day, you can also vote for the person in your writing. You don't have to vote for the party. People are voting mostly for the leader. So, if you support Green, then vote for Green, man. Do you. And then let's complain about the proportional representation aspect, which I think is a big challenge. All right. So with that, guys, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening to me. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate everybody on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, because I'm multi-streaming pretty much everywhere. Okay. I'll see you guys later. We'll have the results tonight. It's going to be very interesting. All right. Talk to you guys soon.